Hi, Chuck here. I'm in San Francisco right now attending the AI Dev conference that's happening today and tomorrow, which will be the 28th and 29th. Day one is done, so I wanted to go give you the highlights of what happened during day one and my takeaway of the conversations that were had and the presentations. So there was a lot of talk about what software engineering is in AI. It feels like we're in a position of, is it software engineering or is it AI engineering, and what does it look like? The first presentation I went to talked about the K shape of software engineering. And this is where you have one leg going up, one leg going down, and the leg going up are groups of engineers who look at system design, understand the business. They take application development and coding from a higher level. The other leg going down are the engineers who are into code. They want code perfection. They spend time down worrying about design patterns and frameworks, and that's their focus. And so the argument is, the question was, what is software engineering going to look like in the future? If you stand back and look at the presentations that happened today, you see this K-shape playing out in the presentations, at least I did. Some presentations were about design and software architecture, getting the best value out of the AI coding agents. The other presentations were about coding, and they would show code on the screen, and it was very in the weeds. And I think this represented what the first presentation talked about, was the K-shape of software engineering. What's software engineering? Where's it going? What is it going to look like in the future? There was a software engineering panel that was put together and hosted by the Silicon Valley girl. And they talked about a wide range of ideas and concepts. I recommend you going and watching it. I'm sure it'll be up on the Silicon Valley girls YouTube channel. But towards the end, they talked about what is the future of software engineering. And most of the panelists, if not all the panelists, agreed that software engineering is moving away from the engineering aspect of it. And it's going to be more hands-off. It's moving up a level. It's going to be more, one of the panelists talked about AI managers, that engineers are no longer going to be engineering, they're going to be managing a bunch of agents. And they even went further and said that the idea of a manager now, managing people, is likely going to go away. And in fact, everyone who's going to have to become a manager, learn the management skills to effectively manage these agents or people or both. And then Andrew, in his keynote, he talked about how we need to get away from coding. The age of coding is over. We need to embrace AI coding. The second thread of the day was the autonomy or the components of an agent. What does it look like? I got the feeling that we're still trying to figure out really what an agent is and what makes up an agent. There's memory components, there's a context component, and how does it all look and work together? Do you use RAG? Do you do context engineering? What are skills, MCPs? How do these all fit together? And I think as an industry, in the AI industry, is still trying to figure out how that fits together and what does an agent look like. And there was a lot of conversation about that in different presentations. You saw that. The third thread of the day was all around data. How do you clean data? How do you get it into your system? How do you navigate the regulatory restrictions around data? How do you deal with latency? For example, you have a autonomous car driving around. The car doesn't have time to send a photo to the cloud and bring it back to make a decision that needs to be made in a split second to determine whether to brake or not. Also talked about the different flavors of data. The average company has 400 sources of data. It all looks different. It's in JSON, it's images, it's PDFs, database dumps, files sitting in SharePoint. It's everywhere. So that was the third thread of the day. And that wrapped up the day. That's it for day one. I hope you enjoyed this recap. Day 2 is done. Last night I drove up from San Francisco. Took me about 3 hours. Today I'm back in the studio, as you can see, and let's talk about these Day 2 highlights. There were 3 themes that I took out of Day 2. The first one was harness, second one was context, and the third one is security and isolation. I think we'll start out of order here and let's talk about context engineering. Basically, the message was that context engineering is about getting the right information in the context at the right time. We need to prune our prompts, especially around process, boilerplate instructions. The message was that because the model providers have included this information into the training data, so these models know how to deal with process and how to deal with RAG and context. And so you'll get more bang out of your buck if you add domain knowledge, a grounding truth to the context. Just giving access to the data does not guarantee understanding. It's actually more important to have the model understand the data than give it a ton of data. There are 4 myths that came out of one of the talks on context building. One of them is RAG over document solves everything. It doesn't. Just connecting to an MCP will solve your problems. It doesn't. The bigger the context is better. Again, it doesn't. What they've found is the bigger the context, the more information you have in the context, the harder it is for the agent to reason on specific concepts. It basically dilutes your tokens. And then adding rules to your context in your prompt fixes everything. It doesn't. These are the high points from the context talks that I went to. Let's talk about the harness. I heard it stated a couple times that the models are now smart enough to do most tasks we give to them. But the problem we have now is we need to build up the harnesses. The harness is now the weakness. And so we need to start building out the body of the agent, like building out memory, tools, and skills. And asking questions like, how do we surface long-term memories? How do we capture the essence of a conversation or a document to store in those long-term memories? And how do we load back that information into the agent and know when it needs that information? When is the right time? Another point that was made in the talks was building a harness that takes advantage of model strengths. The example was given was some people use Claude to do their design and spec building for features. And then they build it, and then they use Codex to refactor and review the work because Codex is stronger at detailed-oriented tasks. So that's my takeaways from the harness theme of the day. Last theme of the day was security and isolation. So the first big idea came out of a Docker presentation where they introduced Docker Sandbox. Now, most people, myself included, I run Cloud Code on my machine. It has full access to the command lines, to the environment variables, anything it wants to do, it could really do it. And this is where Docker Sandbox comes in. And Docker Sandbox allows you to run your agents in a secured, small, contained environment within your computer. And you give it access to the information you want it to see. You give it access to the commands it can execute. Imagine you have an agent who needs to run some Python or run some command line tools. Well, those tools could be malicious. You don't know what they're doing or going to run. You're just trusting the agent to run the commands and not be malicious or harmful to your system. Or instead, if you run them on Docker Sandbox, you define what has access and what doesn't have access and what they can do and what they can't do. A second talk I went to was on security and isolation around data. The argument was that most agents have direct access to the database. And, I'll have to agree. I'm guilty of that too. My agents connect directly to the database and execute their queries. Their argument was that's a security risk. Support their claims. They showed a tweet of someone tweeting out saying, look, I gave my agent access to the database and it deleted the entire database. I've seen that tweet before. I get the risk. I just wonder, like, how often does that happen? But regardless, it's still a risk. And so the argument is that don't give your agent direct access to the database. Instead, create a data layer. And what this does is allows your agent to access the database, but through a layer that you control. You put securities in place. You can filter what data it gets. You can shape the data. You can give it different data sources. The whole idea was to put a layer there so that you have some control over what the agent sees and what it does with the data. That's it for the themes of day 2. I enjoyed my time in San Francisco. I met people from all over the world. I met a guy who's traveling the States from Brazil. He's stopping in San Francisco. He's heading up to Redmond next week. I met a guy who used AI to study butterflies. It was a good 2 days. We had some good conversations. If you found this video helpful, click the subscribe button. It helps others find my videos. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I put out videos on AI development weekly. If you have any thoughts or questions or comments, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. With that, thanks for watching. Stay curious and keep learning.